right, let's. Last night, President Trump had his first State of the Union, and I know on the last CBS poll I saw had a 75% approval rating.
Yeah.
If you're Nancy Pelosi, you just had a big puss on your face, even when he said, "Let's work together."
She's so cool. another one for Nancy.
Let's go to the phones. Alex Smith from the RNC calling in from the swamp. Alex, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
We always call it the swamp. Sorry, lady. That's just life.
That's okay. It is indeed.
So let's talk about the President's State of the Union yesterday and kind of what it means for the Republican Party moving through 2018 here.
Well, I think what it means is that we have a clear agenda ahead of us, whether it's fixing immigration problems in the short term or it's long term, looking ahead to infrastructure. It's clear that the Republicans have a plan, and the president has the motivation to go out there and to get ahead on these issues. I think that what we saw yesterday, though, was that from the Democrats' sort of poor performance in response to the speech, that their only plan is a knee-jerk opposition to the president and to the Republican Congress, which is not something that the American people want at this time in our country's history.
Especially after he went out of his way to say, hey, we'd like to work with you together on things. And I thought one of the key sentences of the whole speech is when he said, look, if we work on this immigration thing, both sides are not going to get everything they want, but we're going to produce something that the American people need, which I did not hear any sort of that from our previous occupant of that same house.
I totally agree. That line really stuck out to me as something that I think a lot of Americans watching at home found to be just eminently reasonable and something that, they're used to in their own lives, which is compromise. I think that Americans make decisions and have to get along with others and compromise every single day. And they don't understand why the representatives that they send to Washington just can't seem to do that and lock horns all the time. So I think that line was particularly powerful for just, average Americans sitting at home.
So when you work at the RNC, your job is to raise money and help get people elected. And as we move to a midterm election, let's talk about how this speech is something that could possibly help stem the tide of some of those seats that are usually lost in a midterm.
So I'll have just a minor correction here. I actually work for America Rising PAC.
I apologize.
No worries. Busy time, lots of guests. We're the Republican Party's premier opposition research firm. So what we do all day is keep an eye on Democrats, so you don't have to.
Right. Gotcha.
And so we're watching both the 2020 Democrats and the 2018 Democrats. So speaking to the midterm prospects, I think what this does, again for us, is that it gives the Republicans that are running in those districts an agenda and a plan. And if you look at something like infrastructure, that's something that I think many of the people in these swing districts can understand, which is that roads are crumbling, bridges are falling apart. The country's in badly need of some of an investment, particularly to keep the economic growth that we've seen over the last year really going and really to expand exponentially. So I think that the idea of bringing home dollars from Washington to those districts to fix those problems, that's a great selling point for these congressmen and for these senators. And I think that the ones that are just sort of in lockstep behind Nancy Pelosi and lockstep behind Chuck Schumer are really going to have some tough questions to answer back home.
And I guess what the reaction of all of these things is based on whether or not you feel really safe in your re-election chances in relation to what state. So you have guys like Cory Booker going to the ugly, fear-mongering, religion, patriotism, this kind of thing. And but then you have guys like, some of these other folks that might need to, appeal to some independents and Republicans saying, at least standing up and clapping and shutting their mouth after the speech.
Oh, it's funny. I was watching that same thing yesterday, that same dynamic play out, and for even the most basic lines about, applauding, the growth in the economy that Americans are experiencing and the benefits that everyday Americans are experiencing through their paychecks and through their workplaces. We couldn't even get Democrats to stand for that. So, there was just clearly a disconnect there. But I agree in terms of some of these more vulnerable 2018 Democratic senators standing up, like Joe Manchin or even Bob Casey at times. It was funny to me because, it's such a simple gesture to stand up and clap, but at the same time, it kind of rings hollow when you look at their voting record. That was really just sort of like, the show that they're putting on for their constituents because they know that they have a lot of eyeballs to that television. What they're hoping that they don't see is that they have voting records that look more like, a San Francisco liberal than they do, like the constituents would want from their home states. And so I think that, while I'm happy that some of them could muster the enthusiasm to applaud very basic things, it's sort of an empty gesture when you really look at how they vote.
Well, I didn't get to see the video of whether or not how hard it was for Nancy to stand up and clap for that poor guy who escaped North Korea. I was hoping that I don't know if she stood for that or not. I assume she did, but
I don't know. I mean, honestly, when I looked out at the pan shot, there were a number of times where even if you just looked at the president's guest, a place where, yes, he was using the guest to buttress, an argument that he was making in favor of a policy, but at the same time, their individual stories were certainly worth noting and applauding and admiring. And, for really any of those stories and just looking out to the audience and seeing, Democrats staring straight ahead. I think there was a line where President Trump was talking about supporting our veterans, and if you look at the shot, there were Democratic congresswomen who were on their phones and kind of showing each other their phones.
Right.
So, it was just terribly disrespectful.
My last thing for you is how much fun are you guys going to have with Nancy and Debbie Wasserman Schultz talking about crumbs for $1,000 bonuses? Oh,
we had a lot of fun with that. So we actually we found that footage. America Rising did, and we put it out there, and it was just incredible to us to see, to see both of them double down on a metaphor that's just so tone deaf. And even there were Democrats out there that were saying, geez, Nancy, you think you could come up with something else to say? Because, it just, for an average American, maybe not for Nancy Pelosi and her family, but for an average American, $1,000 is a lot of money. It means, the difference between being able to do something and not. And I think that it shows sort of how out of touch they are, and it shows really the fact that Democrats have still, 1 year later, have not been able to come up with
with a huge
message.
With a huge amount of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, $1,000 makes a difference. And to me, this crumbs line is Nancy's deplorables moment.
Totally agree. It just shows an utter disconnect with where the majority of Americans are at right now.
Well, Alex, thanks for the call-in. Totally appreciate it, and we'll catch you in the future. And good luck with what you guys are trying to do, because we need to stem the tide on the midterms. And I think if you look at the way this economy is going and people are getting jobs and making more money, this is what we need.
Yep. Well, thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks, Alex. Have a good day.